Hi, this is Brett with Piano Aha. In this video we want to look at Bach's Prelude in C major and play the left hand at sight even if you've never played piano or read sheet music before. The only things you'll need to know are how to read when the notes go up and down in the music or up and down at the piano, what the lines and spaces mean in the music and on the piano, what flats and sharps mean, and where the first note of the piece is, middle C. Now if you don't know these four things, then you can see our video about that, and if you do, then let me show you what I mean. So we see that the very first note is indeed middle C, that's this key here, and we want to find the next one. So we see that it's also on a line and somewhat above the first one. So that must be here, right? Because this note would have been on a space. And if we continue here, again we see the same as the first note and then the same as the second note. So if I play from here to here, it sounds like this. Now you might be wondering why I didn't play this note here, and that's because of this arc here that's called a tie that just extends this note. It means that I hold it without having to play it again. So again, the first measure sounds like this. And similarly, the second measure would sound like this. Right, so this same rhythmical pattern repeats throughout the entire piece. Our emphasis today will just be finding the notes. So I'm not going to be playing each one like this. We'll just be finding these two notes and say, we're happy if we can find what these two notes are. Okay, so let's try to find the notes in the second measure. And a measure, of course, is just the space between these vertical lines here. So we have these already. What changes? What stays the same? We see that the lower note stays the same, and the upper note was on a line, and now it goes down to a space. So it must be here. And now we take a look across the line here. What changes? What stays the same? Well, the upper note was on a space. The upper note's still in the same space, so that doesn't change. But the lower note was on a line and is now on the next space below it. So it must be here. And now we see both of these spaces move up to a line. Now this is especially easy. Nothing changes. And now history repeats itself basically, because the upper note goes down and the lower note, which was on this line here, just stays. It's just like at the beginning. And here the upper note stays the same and the lower note goes down. And here the upper note again changes and the lower one goes down. And then again, it's almost getting boring here. The upper note stays the same and the lower note goes down. See, we were on a space and now we went down to the line. And starting here, it gets interesting. This note looks like it's a long way away from the other ones, but you can also look at it this way. This note, that was the lower note, repeats itself here, but just now it's the upper note. So I'm going to go ahead and play that with my thumb. And now I need to find this note. Well, so I have this one. If I would have had a note on this next line directly below that, that would have been here, right? Because I've been skipping over this space. But I'm actually on the next line, so I'm going to have to skip over another space. And that is indeed where these notes are. Now again, it looks like here, like I'm having to jump quite a ways, but I'm going to concentrate on this note here, because I know where that is, and the next two notes are just next to it. One is a little bit above and one a little bit below. So basically I'm just going in two directions, splitting that note in two. And on the next line, we can see that we had here two spaces. Here we also have two spaces. It's just that now we have a flat. So that upper note has to go one key in that direction. And now, in order to find these next notes, we see these are both on spaces, and these are both on lines. Now, I might be a little bit confused because I am on a black key right now. So let's just act like this black key hadn't happened. That means that theoretically I would have been here. Now those are two spaces, and these are two lines, and they just went down one, right? So just have to go to the left, white key. Now the same thing happens here basically. Now the upper note gets a flat, and now I'm looking for these. I'll just act for a moment just like if this flat hadn't happened, and I see that it just goes down one from these two lines to this space. So we've got that. Now the lower note stays the same. You see that was on a space, and this is on the same space, and the upper note goes down one here. And now it's the lower note's turn to change, and the upper one stays the same. And we've already made it to the second page. Now again, it could look like this is a long way away from here, but if you look closely, this lower note here, this one here, actually is present in the next measure as well. So I'm going to go ahead and play that with my thumb because I see that the other note is below it. Now, if I would have had the line below that, I would be here. But I actually have the line below that. So again, I have to skip down, skipping over the space. And I'm here. And now I orient myself on this note again, and I see that this goes a little bit up, and this goes a little bit down. So now, the lower note stays the same, and the upper note was on this space, and now it goes up to the next space. So it must be skipping to here, right? So now I have these. And now we've come to the most difficult part in the piece to read at sight. Because you see here there are a lot of big distances between the notes and also sharps and flats. So let's go through this slowly. How can I find these notes here? Well, if I see this upper note here that's on a space, and look down and see that this note is just one below it on a line, then that's actually not very far of a skip, right? At least for the upper note. Now let's look at the lower one. The lower one was on a space. Now this one is on a space again, but it's not in the space directly below this one. That would have been here. It's in the space below that. So that must be here. And now I'll give you a tip. Here we have a jump, and we also have a sharp. Whenever you have a situation like this, deal with the lines and spaces first, and do the sharps and flats at the end. So let's just try to find this new note first. So the lower note, again, if we ignore the sharp, is the same as it was before. And if I had the note above that in that space, that would have been here. But we have the space above that. So basically what we have is this here. And now I just have to add the sharp. All right, so I'm just dealing with these two notes here. And now we need to find these, which again look like they're difficult to find. But if we shortly ignore this sharp here, and remember that basically what we're playing is this, we see that this note is in a space directly between these two spaces. So that must be this note here. And now we just need to find this upper note. Again, we're going to find the notes, the spaces and the lines first, and at the end we'll add the flat. Now I could just remember that this is the same note I was playing before. That would be helpful. Or I could just count from here up skips on the spaces. So I have a space. If I had the next space, it would be here. The next space, it would be here. But now I'm on the line right above that. So it must be this note here. And then of course I add the flat, giving me that. So now we're basically home free. We see that this note in the bottom stays the same for a very long time. So again, where we are is right here. Now the upper note stays the same. And now the lower one, again, if we ignore this flat for just a moment, we would have been here. The lower one just goes down one. So this is where we are here. Now all we have to do is just read the upper note. This one goes down. That goes down again. Here it even stays the same. Now, here's a good question for you. Does this go up or down? Well, in a way, both. But the correct answer here would be it goes up, right? We're on a line, it goes up to the space, and then it goes down because it gets a flat. But don't let that throw you. Don't think that because there's a flat there, this note must be lower than the one before, right? It's actually a higher note. We were here, we go up to the space and add the flat. So now we have this. Now these flats and sharps are only valid for one measure time. So this flat does not count anymore here. So we lose the flat. In other words, we go back to where we would have been without the flat. Now we see across this line here, if we can compare, that was on a space, now it goes down to a line. This stays the same. And now we have a similar situation to this here above us, that the upper note just goes down one, and the lower note was on a line. If we would have the next line, it would have been here, right? We just would have done a skip, but now we have indeed the next line, so we have this here. The next measure is exactly the same, right? As far as which notes we need, at least. Now the upper note goes down one, and the upper note goes down one. Now, don't let it throw you, by the way, that I'm playing this with retracted fingers. Normally I would be playing it like this, but just in order so that you can see my hand, I've been pulling my fingers back. In any case, now you can find all of the notes in the piece. Now you might have a different version of this music that looks like this. In other words, for example, in measure 1, we just have seemingly one note in the left hand, same in measure 2, 3, 4, all the way up to this measure here. But if you look closely, this is the exact same thing. It's just that the author has written the first two notes in the left hand in different staves, right? So indeed, that is still the left hand, and that's the left hand. I think this version is easier to read. That's why I made this version. They sound identical, of course. There's absolutely no difference in the way that it is played. It's just that it's written in such a way that the notes are in two different staves. And as long as you know that the first note is this middle C and the next one is a skip above it, starting here, you just have to use the same mode of thinking. The lower note stays the same, and now the upper note goes down one. The upper note now stays the same. The lower note goes down one. They both go up to the line there. Now the upper one stays the same and the lower one stays the same. So they both stay the same, right? It's a little bit more difficult to recognize that fact, but it actually stays the same. The upper one goes down. This lower one stays the same. Now the lower one goes down and the upper one stays the same. And then starting here, the music is the exact same as in this other version. It's just more difficult to see that from going from here all the way down to here actually just means go down one white key. So you can play from either one of these versions. If you have music that's like this, you just need to understand what's meant by it. Or if you'd like, you can download this one from our website. So now you can find all of the notes for this piece in the left hand. Now you might be thinking, yeah, I can find all the notes and I played them all, but that took a long time. And I would grant you that and say, yeah, you're right, it probably took a long time. The point of this was not that you can suddenly play this in tempo, but that you understand the logic behind the system of musical notation that we're dealing with here, right? It's easy to have the idea that you need to know the name of every single one of these keys and every one of these notes on the page in order to play. But just like if I see you at the park and I say, hey, you want to play soccer? You don't need to know my name in order to play soccer with me, right? And if we got 22 people out there playing soccer, you don't have to know the name of each one of those people in order to steal the ball from them and kick a goal yourself, right? The same thing here. You don't need to know the name of each one of these notes in order to play with them. So that's the maybe takeaway from this video. If you understand the system, the way the notes go up and down and skip from lines to spaces, then you can understand the notes to any piece. The things you need to know are how the notes go up and down, the lines and spaces, the flats and the sharps, and knowing where middle C is also never a bad idea. And with that, I bid you happy ahas.